Hello again. I want to say a few words today in the Safe Relationship Training series as far as the grooming process is concerned. And I sometimes refer to this as the conditioning process because in a sense, if someone is trying to groom us for a particular role in a relationship or in any situation, part of that grooming process can also be a conditioning of the partner to fall in line with a certain role. And it's quite useful to be able to identify when we are being specifically groomed for a role in a relationship or a particular situation. And then, of course, we can also identify whether we actually want to fall in line with that grooming process or not. So it's quite a good idea to be able to identify exactly what's going on in a dynamic very early on, before we allow ourselves to be groomed in a certain way, when it could be a little bit more difficult to actually withdraw from a situation in which we've already been conditioned. So I want to say a little bit about the grooming process, and as far as us being groomed, being drawn in to a particular situation, there generally needs to be something on offer from the other person so that we will have something to entice us to be able to fall in line with this grooming role, as it were. Otherwise, we're not going to be tempted to go down a role, generally, if we do not think there is anything at the end of the line. And so a groomer or a potential abuser, it doesn't have to necessarily be an abusive situation, because people can be groomed in all sorts of situations and relationships to fall in line with someone else's agenda. But if we are taken out of our own path, and if our identity is being messed around with in the process, then we could potentially look upon that as being an abusive or dysfunctional situation. Because if we are unable to maintain our boundaries in a situation, and our identity and our dignity and our personhood, then we need to take a step back and to have a look at what is going on closely within the grooming process. So knowing whether we can maintain boundaries is quite a good indication as far as, are we in a healthy situation or not? Because we need to be able to take care of ourselves and protect ourselves, and for that to be accepted, for us to maintain healthy situations and relationships in our lives. So we need to be able to set boundaries, so that's quite a good test early on as to whether this other individual is able to respect us and our humanity enough to listen to our boundaries and to be able to act accordingly. If not, that is something of a red light, because we need to have boundaries. We need to be able to act assertively, and for the other person to be able to honour that appropriately, if we are to maintain safe relationships and situations, and to be able to go on to live a happy and fulfilling life, and to fulfill our purpose. So the grooming role, the first point to understand is that there may be something on offer at the end of the road, given as an enticement And even if that enticement is only in our own mind, which the groomer may know or may assume. So, for instance, an example might be if someone is trying to draw us into a casual relationship, but it appears to be a bona fide normal dating progression, then our assumption may be that we are heading towards a committed relationship. And the groomer may allow us to have that assumption, knowing that we believe that there is a bona fide relationship at the end of it, whereas the grooming process is conditioning, potentially, us to fall in line with a casual relationship where the other person dips in and out as and when they want to. And so the assumption that we may have and the groomer's agenda may be two entirely different things. And the way that we can tell the difference and to delineate that line so that we can set boundaries is to boundary ourselves in terms of what we personally will offer to the other person. And so some people, for instance, might not engage in a physical relationship with someone until they are in a committed relationship, so that they do not become groomed for casuality at all. And they do not end up as a booty call at the end of the day because they've already set that boundary with themselves. And so that tends to filter out the contenders from the pretenders, as it were, who do not hang around for someone who isn't going to hand over the goods at the end of the day. So that's one example of us making ourselves ungroomable for a certain situation or relationship, because in doing so, we do not allow ourselves to come in line with the groomer's agenda, if it is not in line with our own agenda at the end of the day. And so from discernment, we can discern whether this person is good for us or whether this situation is good for us, and to be able to discern whether that person is actually bringing us in line with the grooming process rather than coming into a mutually satisfying situation whereby both parties are on the same page and have the same agenda and therefore are heading in the same direction. So the grooming process can only go forward if the partner or the victim will come in line with the process and are willing to be groomable. And the grooming process may also include being manipulated and controlled in a certain way so that the partner comes in line with the format that the other person has set up. For instance, so that the partner or the person only acts in a certain way which is in line with the other person's agenda. So, for instance, if the other person doesn't want you to be able to set boundaries, then whenever you set boundaries, something will come along to bust those boundaries and to send you the message that it's not going to happen, that only the abusers will be done. And so, setting a boundary and having someone else block that boundary in some way, it could be in a very covert way, but when you get the message sent continuously that your boundaries are not going to be allowed to be set, that's a red flag. as is the ability to be able to speak your mind and be able to stand up for what you want in the relationship. And if that is continually blocked, that can be part of a grooming process whereby only the other person's desires and wants and needs are considered seriously. And so at the end of that type of grooming process, the partner may give up altogether and think it's just too much hard work coming in line with their own agenda and having their own needs met in that relationship. And in giving up, they hand over power to the abuser, who then is able to follow their own agenda and bring the other person in line with very little effort at the end of the day, because the person has already been conditioned through the grooming process to automatically do and think about the abuser's needs first, so that they don't meet with any negative results, which has happened in the past. And so the grooming process is a process that would generally only continue if the abuser believes that it's going to be successful. If not, then they could sort of bow out at any point. But as you can see, if you can recognise the grooming process and what might be going on as far as the other person is concerned, it can help us in giving us the ability to withdraw from a situation which is potentially conditioning us in a certain direction, so that we can go on to take care of ourselves in the future and have happy and healthy relationships. So, as always, stay safe and very happy. Bye-bye.